Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's January 18th. Today we celebrate the man who bought a forested property, and he wrote Winnie the Pooh. We'll also learn about the poet who found fame and then gardening on a grand scale. We'll hear some wonderful words about thistles, and we grow that garden library today with a behind-the-scenes look at one of the world's top gardens. And then we'll wrap things up with the bizarre story of the maple image that was used on Canadian currency. Now, before we get to all of that, I wanted to take a quick second to tell you about two ways that you can connect with the show. The first one is a website called Podchaser. And if you head on over to Podchaser, you'll notice it's a brand new podcast directory. And it's set up to help you make finding and reviewing podcasts easier than ever. In fact, if you like a particular episode, you can even rate an individual episode as opposed to rating an entire program. So that's a cool new feature. And you can find the Daily Gardener on Podchaser. And if you do, I would absolutely love it if you could take a few moments and leave a review for the show. Compared to so many other podcasts out there, I think the Daily Gardener has a little bit of catching up to do. I think we have about 10 reviews, and I'd like to see that number grow just a little bit more in the hopes that people who like botanical history, botanical literature, and just gardening in general can hopefully find the show. So if you love the show, I would really appreciate a review from you, and you can do that over at podchaser.com. Next, I'd like to encourage you to sign up for the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. It's a fun little email that you can receive from me every Friday. And you know, it's a lovely way for me to connect with you, the listeners of the show. So I try to make the newsletter like you're getting a little note from a garden friend. I share what's going on in my garden world, along with fun ideas and products that I'm excited about, as well as many of the kind of things that I talk about on the show during the week, like botanical history and literature. So if you'd like to get a little garden note from me on Fridays, just head on over to the website for the show, thedailygardener.org, and sign up for the free Friday newsletter today. Here's today's curated news. Today's article was written by James Wong, and it's called Garden Shortcuts? No Thanks. And James's article was featured in The Guardian. In this piece, James talks about the desire in media to make everything into a soundbite, to provide shortcuts. And to James, this notion flies completely in the face of what gardening is all about. James writes, "To me, gardening is the best hour of my week, not the worst. It's the one time I turn off my phone. I don't have to worry about urgent emails and scary headlines, and can just totally lose myself by communing with the natural world. To me, gardening is unique in that it combines all the activity and therapeutic benefits of a walk in the woods with the thrill of creative expression." And then he says, "I actively design all of my projects to be high maintenance, as, call me crazy, I actually enjoy gardening, and I want to do more of it, not less." Well, I loved this article by James. I loved his fresh perspective, which I appreciate. And if you'd like to read this article for yourself, and I hope that you do, you're in luck. All you need to do is type in the words shortcuts in the Facebook group for the show, and James's post will pop right up. I try to make it super easy for you to get access to the articles that I curate for the show. So I put them all in the Facebook group for the show. Now, if you're not in the group, it's completely free and easy to join. The next time you're on Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of the English author best known for his books about a teddy bear named Winnie the Pooh, Alan Alexander Milne, who was born on this day, January 18th, in 1882. In 2015, the garden historian Catherine Alto wrote a book that explored the iconic landscape around Alan's second home, Cochford Farm in England. Surrounded by fields and Ashdown Forest, Cochford was the perfect place for Alan's young son, Christopher Robin, to spend weekends and holidays and to imagine adventures with his favorite toys, Pooh, Piglet, Tigger, Eeyore, Kanga, and Roo. As an adult, Christopher later described it this way. So we were there in 1925 with a cottage, a little bit of garden, a lot of jungle, 2 fields, a river, and then all the green, hilly countryside beyond, meadows and woods, waiting to be explored. Finding inspiration at every turn, the group of pine trees on the other side of the main road became the fabled 6 pine trees, and the bridge over the river became Pooh Sticks Bridge. The trees of Ashdown Forest played an important role in the Winnie the Pooh series. A beech tree was Piglet's house. Owl's house was one of Christopher Robin's favorite trees because he could walk on one of the limbs. And in the story, it said that it had its elbow on the ground, and an alder tree with rustling leaves shaded Eeyore as Pooh sat nearby on a rock. And although he lived in a large old walnut tree, Pooh's favorite tree is the bee tree, which offered his favorite treat, honey. Finally, Piglet and Pooh followed the tracks of a woozle through a thicket of larch trees. Larches are conifer trees, like pines, because they have needles instead of leaves. However, unlike pines, larches are not evergreen. They're deciduous, so every autumn, the needles of larches turn yellow and then drop off the branches, and larch seeds grow in cones. And here's a fun little fact about the illustrator of Winnie the Pooh, Ernest Howard Shepard. He wisely drew the trees of the forest first and then added the characters last to help create the feeling of the enormity of the forest. It was Alan Alexander Milne who wrote, "Flowers give a prolonged delight to all, both in the garden and out of it. And though one can buy cut flowers, one cannot buy the happiness which they give us as they grow." And he also wrote, "Weeds are flowers too, once you get to know them." Today, Ashdown Forest is a protected nature area. And today is the anniversary of the death of the English journalist, short story writer, poet, and novelist Rudyard Kipling, who died on this day, January 18th, in 1936. One of England's most famous writers, Rudyard purchased a property called Bateman's in East Sussex in 1902. Rudyard called it his good and peaceable place. From the onset, Rudyard envisioned Bateman's to be preserved in perpetuity. To ensure his vision would become a reality, Rudyard purchased 300 acres of land surrounding the property. And when Rudyard became the very first English writer to win the Nobel Prize for Literature, He spent all the prize money on his garden. Well, I would have done the same. The gardens at Bateman are a delight. In addition to the beautiful ornamental pond and orchard, there's a pergola, a walled mulberry garden, a walk, a rose garden, a secret door, yes to that, and a sundial inscribed with these words, "It's later than you think." When Rudyard was alive, his garden was a favorite for his guests and visitors. The lily pond was a special attraction, and we get a glimpse of Rudyard's playful side, knowing that he even had a little boat that was anchored to the edge of the pond. Rudyard built the boat for his kids, and they would float around the pond on imaginary adventures. And apparently other people had adventures in the lily pond as well, because if you look in the Kipling family visitor book, after some of the names, Rudyard Kipling added the letters F-I-P for fell in pool. Today, as Rudyard had hoped, Bateman's is under the care of the National Trust. And in 1911, Rudyard wrote his famous garden poem called The Glory of the Garden. Now, I was just going to pick an excerpt, but honestly, I love the whole thing so much, and there are so many little snippets that get quoted from this poem that I just thought it was unfair not to read the entire thing to you. I mean, after all, it is a gardening podcast, and you're probably multitasking. So let's get through Rudyard Kipling's garden poem in all its glory, and it's called The Glory of the Garden. Here it is. Our England is a garden that is full of stately views, of borders, beds and shrubberies, and lawns and avenues, with statues on the terraces and peacocks strutting by. But the glory of the garden lies in more than meets the eye. For where the old thick laurels grow along the thin red wall, you'll find the tool and potting sheds, which are the heart of all. The cold frames and the hothouses, the dung pits and the tanks, the rollers, carts, and drain pipes with the barrows and the planks. And there you'll see the gardeners, the men and prentice boys, told off to do as they are bid, and do it without noise. For except when seeds are planted, we shout to scare the birds. The glory of the garden, it abideth not in words. And some can pot begonias, and some can bud a rose, and some are hardly fit to trust with anything that grows. But they can roll and trim the lawns and sift the sand and loam, for the glory of the garden occupieth all who come. Our England is a garden, and such gardens are not made by singing, "Oh, how beautiful," and sitting in the shade. While better men than we go out and start their working lives at grubbing weeds from gravel paths with broken dinner knives. There's not a pair of legs so thin, there's not a head so thick, there's not a hand so weak and white, nor yet a heart so sick. But it can find some needful job that's crying to be done, for the glory of the garden glorifieth every one. Then seek your job with thankfulness and work till further orders, if it's only netting strawberries or killing slugs on borders. And when your back stops aching and your hands begin to harden, you will find yourself a partner in the glory of the garden. Oh, Adam was a gardener, and God, who made him see that half a proper gardener's work is done upon his knees. So when your work is finished, you can wash your hands and pray for the glory of the garden, that it may not pass away. And the glory of the garden, it shall never pass away. In Unearthed Words, today's words are from one of my favorite garden writers. This is Mandy Kirby from her fabulous book, A Victorian Flower Dictionary. And this little excerpt is about what she wrote on the thistle. Tough and durable, defiant against aggressors, the thistle embodied qualities that the Scots saw as their own, and the flower became their national emblem. And there's a well-known legend of a Viking who stood on a thistle. His cry of pain alerted sleeping Scottish clansmen just in time to hold back the attack. The Order of the Thistle, a chivalric order founded by King James VII, has a famous motto, "No one harms me without punishment," evoking the prickly aggressiveness of the plant. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, A Year at Kew by Rupert Smith. This book came out in 2004, and it's a great way to learn about Kew. In this book, you'll get the chance to see what a year is like at the real Kew Garden in England. This book offers a unique private tour of this magnificent botanical garden. You'll get the chance to meet the world-class experts that work at Kew's greenhouses, labs, and libraries. And the monthly chapters also offer a review of the flurry of activities at Kew, from what is blooming and what is getting planted to the special events and exhibitions. In addition, every month, one of the curators shares their fascinating work and career at Kew. This book is 192 pages of behind-the-scenes programs, plants, and people of Kew, and would make a wonderful gift for any gardener or for anyone who just wants to have a little virtual getaway. Right now, these behind-the-scenes books are just the ticket when you're trying to survive lockdown in a pandemic. You can get a copy of A Year at Kew by Rupert Smith and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $2. That's a steal. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day, January 18th, in 2013, that Reuters published an article about the new Canadian dollar bill. The article by Randall Palmer was called "Canada Put Wrong Maple Leaf on New Canadian $20 Bill." Here's an excerpt. Canada is known for the sugar maple, emblazoned on its red and white flag. But the Bank of Canada has put what one careful botanist says is a foreign Norway maple leaf on its new currency. The untrained eye might not at first spot the difference on the new $20, $50, and $100 bills between the maple leaf and the North American sugar maple. But it is clear to Sean Blaney, a botanist who tracks plants for the Atlantic Canada Conservation Data Center in New Brunswick. Sean said, "The maple leaf on the currency is the wrong species." Sean said the Norway maple has more lobes or sections and has a more pointed outline than the sugar maple, and the lobe that rises in the center is shorter than the sugar maple. The Norway maple was imported from Europe and is now also common in North America. Sean said, "It is naturalized to Canada, but it's not the grand sugar maple." Well, the central bank said that the image on the new bills was purposefully designed not to represent any specific species, but rather to be a combination of various kinds. The bank currency spokesperson, Julie Gerard, said, "It's not a Norway maple leaf. It's a stylized maple leaf, and that is what it ought to be." She said the banknote designers created the image with the help of a dendrologist or a botanist who specializes in trees and shrubs. But Sean Blaney, the botanist, is not buying the explanation. He said, "I think it's just an after-the-fact excuse." That may have been their intention, to not have it be a specific species of maple, but they should have drawn it differently if that were the case, because the maple that they've drawn is quite clearly a Norway maple. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Wyoming, Minnesota with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, Kiana Rayleigh, Maddie Doyle, Natalie Decker, and Eric Begay. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Instagram, and listeners always have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. All the stories and books that are featured on the show can be found over at thedailygardener.org, thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. Last but not least, you can share your own gardener greetings on the show by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.